today I wanted to provide an overview of our approach to Gen AI product development, talk about how and why we're different, and also, I think most importantly, why that matters for using Gen AI in your legal work. So our goal is really to bring generative AI safely into the legal practice. We want to combine the power of the latest large language model technology, but also do so in a way that's reliable. We have our customers trust. That is something that is critical to us. And so our lodestar is reliability. And so what I've done on this slide here is identify some key ways in which we differ from other generative AI solutions. The first thing here, when I say that we're grounded in Westlaw, not the open web, most, or I wouldn't say, all of the consumer grade large language models are trained on web data. What we did is we took the latest large language model technology, which was trained on the web, but then we further trained it and programmed it and really embedded it in Thomson Reuters trusted content. So it doesn't just integrate with Westlaw and Practical Law, and it does do that, but actually our agentic AI workflows are grounded in that data. What does that mean? Well, that means that CoCounsel's answers are, of course, grounded in authoritative, continuously updated legal content with citations you can check. So one thing that means right off the bat is fewer hallucinations and also transparency. So you can essentially check CoCounsel's chain of thought and understand when it's answering your questions where it's pulling from in Westlaw and Practical Law. But another reason why that's important, in addition to just transparency and understanding the answers, is that CoCounsel's answers are better because they are grounded in trusted legal content. And the reason why I can say that is because I was at a legal research startup that partnered with OpenAI before joining Thomson Reuters. I was at Casetext, where we worked extensively with OpenAI. They're one of our partners, and we did reinforcement learning from human feedback on their model, and we did everything we could with web data to build a safe, legal Gen AI. The problem was that web data has noise. So we spent a lot of engineering work and we use the latest tech to try to teach the model to return better legal content, to return the correct answer. And the problem wasn't the model, it was the noise in the data. So the problem with open web data is that it's not just cases on the web, it's people's comments about cases and even the case pages on the web. So even if you go to a place, with public case pages, the web data still has a lot of problems. Oftentimes, for example, the majority, concurring, and dissenting opinions are not clearly labeled. That matters a lot to a large language model. If it's just trained on web data, even let's pretend everything on the web is correct, which we know it is not. Even if it's not clearly labeled, it can be challenging for the large language model. What happened to us at Casetext, which I'll say before being acquired by Thomson Reuters, before using Westlaw data, is that the model would frequently confuse the majority, concurring, and dissenting opinion. And of course, why does that matter? That's huge. It will miss the holding of an opinion, right? Or it'll rely on the dissent with disastrous results. Another problem with web data for legal work is that there's no citator. So of course, at Thomson Reuters, a ton of work has been spent developing our key citator and our headnotes to provide that organization and that data to guide the model. But there is none of that guidance on the web. Yeah, and so there's no way when a large language model crawls through the web to know that a case has been overturned unless it finds a comment to that degree, but is the comment accurate? There's just no clear way to check it. And so as a result, even if you are using the latest model, if you're using it on web data, your model is going to be problematic when it comes to answering legal questions correctly because the web is not vetted and correct. There's pieces of correct information and a lot of incorrect information. So in short, the point of that entire data quality story is that even with the latest tech, noise in the data matters and confuses models. So with Thomson Reuters large language models, we are able to essentially protect it from all of that and have it just pull back information from data sources that we know are reliable and correct. So there's none of that noise, none of that confusion, no information from Reddit, no outdated cases, etc. that improves the quality of the output. It's not just for legal research, but across the board. When we develop our agentic AI workflows and they follow Westlaw and Practical Law, you know that they're using the latest and greatest cases to guide that reasoning. So better understanding of precedent, lower risk of hallucinations, just more accurate output across the board happens when you have, for legal work, a large language model focused on reliable legal data. We also, of course, have done a lot of work on the CoCounsel skills, programming them to perform specific legal tasks and CoCounsel skills. And of course, none of this is visible to the end user, but the way the CoCounsel skills work is that they follow a ton of instructions, back-end prompts, essentially checklists of things they have to do before rendering the output to make sure it's reliable. And there's a lot of cross-referencing and checking that goes on. Because all of that goes on in the background, users don't know about it, and sometimes users will think that CoCounsel can take a little bit longer, but it's not taking a little bit longer, just to be irritating. It's doing that deliberately to ensure that the output is accurate. And of course, we are doing a ton of work to make CoCounsel a fast, smooth experience. But one thing I will note is that we won't cut corners on guardrails. And so a lot of that work goes on in the back end, which users don't see, but are really critical to the output. And again, our lodestar here is reliability. So these guardrails will be things that we will, of course, maintain and continue to test thoroughly. We do not let CoCounsel do anything it has not been trained and tested on. This is a really important product principles of ours, and I have another slide that goes into our safeguards against hallucinations. But one thing I want to note here is that if you use ChatGPT or Claude or other general use models, and I love to use those in my personal life, what you'll notice is that those models seem more flexible and can do more things. And that's because there are not guardrails on ChatGPT or Claude, and they're not designed to really do anything. So they're allowed to do everything, right? They're not domain specific. They're not tested in one task. So they are more flexible. But with CoCounsel, we're not building a large language model for, creative writing. We are building one for lawyers. And so we purposefully limit what CoCounsel can do. So it only does those things we know it has tested and can do reliably and do well. And that's part of our commitment to reliability. A little bit more about our safeguards against hallucinations. So I talk at length about how, one way we do it is ensuring that when CoCounsel returns answers, those answers are grounded in trusted Thomson Reuters content. There's other work we do beyond simply having it grounded in our content, which is important. But in addition to that, we have a ton of essentially safeguards that we follow. One thing that we do is we automate large language model as a judge evaluation. So essentially, we have an army of lawyers, data scientists, and other subject matter experts who develop tests for the large language model and essentially create the ideal output as a test that we use against the model's outputs. So our subject matter experts, or SMEs, essentially develop law school type exams and create ideal output, and then we benchmark the model's answers against that authored content. So and when we do that, we also automate the process. So essentially our subject matter experts create a ton of different tests manually, where we write out here is the ideal output. We then validate those tests and automate them thousands and thousands of times. So then the large language model is able to use those ideal answers to grade itself. So we have agents checking the work of other agents, relying on subject matter expert answers in doing that type of evaluation. We also have teams of practicing attorneys manually reviewing results. So in addition to the large language model running these automated tests and AI agents checking the work of other agents, our practicing lawyers also manually validate that output as well. All of this work has to happen before any skill is released. And even after release, of course, we continuously have CoCounsel skills and workflows tested according to the LLM as a judge scoring system, as well as a manual review process. We're, of course, always continuously benchmarking our model output against the latest large language model technology. and also continuously improving our prompt engineering and document chunking techniques to ensure that when CoCounsel processes a large amount of data, it does so in a way that is accurate and reliable and doesn't destroy the large language model's understanding of the context. So we ensure that it retains that context through that system. So this is all about hallucinations, right? So we have the LLM as a judge, the manual review, and our commitment to continuous improvement, along with our thousands of tests. We also do a lot of work, not just guarding against hallucinations, but also ensuring that CoCounsel skills run on the latest and greatest model, and are churning out the best output. So here, this slide talks about how we test each skill, how that our trust team of subject matter experts fine tunes the output of each skill. We do several different approaches here, and in addition to the large language model checking the output and agents checking the work of other agents, we also do random quality assurance tests and develop new tests. So essentially, every CoCounsel skill is subject to over 1,500 tests a night. A lot of testing goes in to make sure that the output is reliable. So essentially millions of tests have been run on CoCounsel since the launch. One more thing here, sorry for skipping ahead, that I want to note about legal benchmarking. In addition to testing the skills and the output, we also benchmark models as they come out. So every time a new model comes out, whether it's from Google or Anthropic or OpenAI or another provider, our team of machine learning engineers test it. And we have a wide variety of tests. And we're not just testing it to see is the output good, but we're specifically testing it for legal work. So simply because a model is good for one task doesn't mean it's good for legal work. And we are continuously benchmarking essentially CoCounsel skills against other models. And we have and will switch our skills over to a new model when that new model surpasses our benchmarks. So essentially, we are not stuck with the model we have now. Far from it. We are always innovating. We are exploring multimodal options. For a period of time, CoCounsel had been multimodal, and then we switched to a newer model from OpenAI when our test showed that was the better model. But the long and short of it is you're never stuck with one model. As the models evolve, CoCounsel evolves too, to ensure that we are at the cutting edge of legal tech. I want to take a moment here just to talk briefly about the roadmap, especially when it comes to legal drafting. One thing I will say is that because our lodestar is accuracy and reliability, and we do all these tests, and we essentially don't let CoCounsel do certain things, some customers have found that it's harder to use CoCounsel for drafting, which can come as a surprise because when we think of generative AI, we think of content generating. One thing I will note is that CoCounsel does draft, and it will continue to draft increasingly complex documents. In fact, it'll be able to draft more and more substantive legal documents before the end of the year. But we have deliberately taken an approach where we don't let CoCounsel just draft. We don't let CoCounsel just generate text. Everything I just said about benchmarking skills and doing agent evaluations, all of that work. Essentially, we do that to ensure reliability. So we don't let CoCounsel just draft like a large language model. What we want CoCounsel to do is draft like a lawyer. So instead of having CoCounsel just generate text by essentially guessing the next word, which is how large language models work, we're using our Agentic technology so CoCounsel actually mimics best practices for legal drafting. So it follows checklists and treatises and practical guides for drafting instead of just guessing the next word. So CoCounsel will not generate an asset purchase agreement or a motion the way that ChatGPT or Claude does it, which is by guessing the next word. It will generate these documents by following trusted guidance and instructions and content. We want CoCounsel to follow best in class practices for drafting. One area where you may have already seen this type of agentic approach is with deep research in Westlaw. With deep research in Westlaw, we are having our agentic AI follow best in class practices for legal research, where the AI has to follow, best authority instructions, check citation histories, case histories, related authorities, secondary sources, and formulate a research plan. That approach is very different from the traditional large language model approach of taking your query and generating text based on guessing the next word, or taking a search query and running it through results and then generating a summary. That is a large language model approach that is not in line with researching best practices. So we don't take the traditional Gen AI approach, we take the agentic approach where AI is following best practices for research and soon drafting based on our agentic workflows. And so that's also something that is orienting our product development principles. We want the AI to adhere to best practices for legal drafting. Now, we want to ensure that our lawyers can use this technology easily to help them draft at any stage in the process. But when it does draft, it'll be following those best practices and not just guessing the next word. Part of our commitment to drafting reliably means that CoCounsel won't just generate text from nothing. When it generates text, it will do so based on either Thomson Reuters content or Thomson Reuters content plus a client's document. So the AI is either following the firm's best practices and precedent, and or just Thomson Reuters content, but it can't just draft based on nothing. So some of our customers sometimes get a bit frustrated when they just give CoCounsel, a one sentence prompt and want CoCounsel to draft a full document. The problem is that if CoCounsel drafted a full document based on a one sentence prompt, that document would have one of the following problems. Either that document would have made a bunch of stuff up, would have made a bunch of assumptions to fill in the blanks, right? Or that document would have been so general to be useless. Fundamentally, if you're drafting a sophisticated legal document, you need more than a one sentence instruction. Why? Because AI is not a mind reader. So if you tell the AI draft a motion for summary judgment based on this one sentence about my case, the AI will have to make a bunch of assumptions in order to draft that, and those assumptions could be wrong. So we don't let CoCounsel draft that way. If you give CoCounsel the instruction to draft a motion for summary judgment, CoCounsel will then use agentic technology to pull the Westlaw resources and pull information from your firm's document management system, if you permit it, to create a relevant, accurate, source-supported MSJ. Same thing with contract drafting. So just to bring it all together, we don't let CoCounsel draft the way other large language models draft, because those models are guessing, are making assumptions, and are making things up. And we've put all these benchmarks in place and all of this testing in place to avoid that type of outcome.